Many of you are just beginning your university careers, or have children or grandchildren or family members just beginning theirs, and have not the faintest idea what in buggery you're doing. I'm here to help. Let me briefly state my qualifications for doing so. I first went up to university 41 years ago. It is a university which, in effect, no longer exists. It is a university which, in effect, no longer exists. Oh, it is still physically there. It looks much the same, for the moment. It has even, after a hell of a fight back by the alumni, retained, for now, the name it has had for the past century and a half, which is not the name under which it started in 1749. But it is not the university I knew. It is now but the shell of itself, in a way which only the poet Philip Larkin has captured in his poem, Homage to a Government. The statues will be standing in the same tree-muffled squares and look nearly the same. Our children will not know it's a different country. All we can hope to leave them now is money. That is the sort of thing, by the way, which must be watched out for at any university these days, even, as in this case, the second oldest in Virginia and thus the South. We'll come back to that. What I'm about to say shortly is almost guaranteed to offend almost everyone and to appear, on the surface, irrelevant. Wait for the payoff and the punchline. What I'm about to say immediately may on the surface seem like a brag or a boast. As you shall learn, it is anything but. In American terms, I double majored in politics and philosophy, taken a very good degree, and with special honors attainments in philosophy. Overseas listeners may better understand me when I say that I did a joint schools degree, politics and philosophy, but not PPE, and was awarded a double first with congratulatory first in the second part of the course. I then spent 3 years in law school, taking my doctorate, again with what was barely a first, frankly ought probably to have been a second. While I was still an undergraduate, I was approached about taking a different postgraduate degree and offered in return a tenure-track academic position at my university after I should have done so. Like a fool, I declined. And during 7 years' worth of higher education, during term time, there were not 48 hours during which I was ever completely sober. I do not recommend this. It is, of course, an indictment of my behavior and my judgment. It is also, to a far lesser degree, a reflection upon the effects of how easily the narrow demands and distractions of the scholar's life can affect the behavior and judgment of many excellent academics who were willing to allow cleverness to pass for the beginnings of wisdom. University is meant to equip the student to learn wisdom. If he or she gets by with it at university, that wisdom shall inevitably be learnt in another and much more expensive school, often called the School of Hard Knocks. It is also sometimes referred to as real life or experience, which deservedly in due time kicked my ass from here to Kansas City. A university is not a trade school. It exists to transmit to the student the tools of learning, to teach one to think, to equip the critical faculty, to employ Socratic methods for Aristotelian ends. Or such at least was the case 40 years ago. In my day, a politics degree was not awarded for activism. It involved a great deal of statistics, psephology, history, policy, and international relations. In my day, a philosophy course was not about feelings, nothing more than feelings, nor was it an excuse to waffle. One of its first and primary groundings was a thorough grounding in formal logic, in how to distinguish truth and spot and reject invalid argumentation. In my day, a law degree was not about activism either. It was about the rules of evidence and of civil and criminal procedure. God only knows what they're doing nowadays. A common complaint of a liberal education, which, by the way, does not mean an education in political leftism, but an education suitable to a free human being, someone enjoying liberty, a believer in the maxim of free men, free minds, and free markets, is that it is not a trade school and therefore leaves graduates with book learning and nothing more. She's brilliant, but she couldn't park a bicycle. Yes, he's smart, but he could fuck up a crowbar. If that is so, it is so only because the universities have, in an attempt to become trade schools, ceased to provide a liberal education the tools of learning are grounded in logic and reason. And if it be so, this is because the universities have become service providers, resorts and spas for the middle-class young, coddling them, where the customer is always right and must be pampered catered to, lest they or their maternal Karens demand to see a manager. If by customer they mean student, they've missed the whole point of a university, which is that the customer is almost always wrong and needs to be taught otherwise than he or she thinks currently. And this has been a problem since the 1960s. With students making demands and laying down the law and presuming to lecture the universities. Students are not there to teach, they're there to learn. That is why they are students. If anywhere in the West you look at what we are stuck with in the way of politicians, public figures, and captains of industry who would qualify to be promoted PFC, you are probably inclined, as I am, to despair and blame the universities. Politicians are, as a class, often given to Machiavellian falsehood and cynical manipulation. The current crop are incredibly bad at it. It's a wicked thing to do, but even a morally bad thing can be done technically well. It's not being done well half the the time, one is not certain if they actually mean to be as bad as they are what they do, or if they're just that stupid. If your ambition is to be a manipulator, you need to learn more logic than is learned by the people you intend to manipulate, so that you can be more deceptive. And look at our privates first class of the industry. As a matter of principle, a concept alien to them, CEOs, and especially in the tech sector, ought not to exert effective political power, even through informal structures, especially through informal structures. That to do so is a result of everyone else's being idiots, that they ought not to do so as a practical matter, never mind a matter of principle, is a result of their being idiots. Idiots savant, but idiots. These are people who have no intellectual hinterland. Take Zuck, please, and far from him. He doesn't wear that haircut because he thinks it makes him look good. He wears it because he's a fanboy with a posthumous crush on Octavian, Caesar Augustus. That is not an instance of Zuck's having an intellectual hinterland. That is an instance of pop cultural osmosis which could be entertained only by someone who knew nothing of Augustus to begin with. He was not an honorable man, nor one to emulate. All Zuck is doing is warning anyone with any degree of sense that he, too, is a wannabe tyrant who must never be trusted with power. Though I shall give him one word of advice for his benefit. Don't eat the figs. The same is true of their political counterparts. Donald Trump is not a master manipulator or a particularly good or talented or effective liar, though he is an indefatigable one. In my party, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Bernie Sanders, along with about 90% of its nationally prominent political class, are likewise very poor manipulators and very poor liars, very pathologically determined to lie. Senator Sanders is so dim he doesn't realize he's lying, he having first successfully deceived himself. In this, as in much else, he is America's very own Jeremy Corbyn. Boris, whatever you think of him, is in a very different class. He clearly possesses only the pagan classical virtues, but his mask of amiable buffoonery is but a mask, and his intelligence is formidable, and his intellectual hinterland wide. There are very few such politicians possessed of a wide intellectual hinterland and a formidable intelligence, of whom a few, thank God, are also virtuous with him. The GOP nationally has 2, maybe 3. In my own party, for example, there are Senators Sinema and Manchin and Howson, and there's Jim Webb. It is an indictment of the people that there is no possible set of circumstances under which it is at all likely that any of them could receive the presidential nomination, let alone win a presidential election. Now, have I managed to offend everyone? Good. Because outside the academic bubble in your real lives, you're going to be offended a great deal right often and right smart more than this. How many of you are equipped right now successfully to argue back? Well, that's something you need to start learning at university, if not before. I like to say I learned the art of cross-examination at my mother's breakfast table, as the witness subjected to it, and no, Mumsy was not a lawyer. And university is, or can be, with a little effort on your part, the place to learn it. I trust I've made my point. Now to the practicalities. Be uniformly affable. Treat everyone you meet with consideration until the time they prove themselves to be unworthy of it. If they are unworthy of it, they'll prove it to you soon enough. Remember always, whether you take the maxim from religion, philosophy, or as a reminder from McFly, you're not special. Unique within certain parameters, but not special. Snowflakes, in that sense, have two things in common with witches. They don't actually exist, and they melt on contact with reality. Ignore the flying monkeys who insist otherwise. Stay reasonably sober. There are a lot of calories in alcohol. Drugs are right at you, no matter how thin they keep you. I never did any, not because I'm morally superior to anyone at all, but because I didn't see the point of running those risks when there was so much brandy, bourbon, single malt whiskey, port, sherry, Madeira, real ale, real cider, real perry, and burgundy going begging, clamoring to be drunk. Take in too many empty booze calories now, and you've had your ration for life, and the future of drinking water, because it shall have consequences. Show me a drinking diabetic, I'll show you a man with a death wish. And the legal consequences of cocking this up can permanently ruin your life and others. You're mortal. So is everyone else. And if you fuck this up, you'll wish you were dead. The reasonably alert shall notice that much of the advice I'm giving is based on what I learned the hard way. Traceba is not the surname of an old Cornish family. Stay reasonably fit. See above. Sometimes this involves running into walls, the accompaniment of clanging noises, all whilst getting your clock cleaned. Play laughably poor amateur squash anyway. Don't sleep around. Bastards are expensive. Disease is not always cured. Getting a reputation which follows you into adult life and is a millstone around your neck is insanity. This, I hasten to add, was never a problem for me. I'm one of those who had always two unfailing methods for birth control and indeed for celibate chastity: my looks and my personality. If, growing up, you attended a church or similar religious institution, continue to do so. Like a latter-day Chesterfield, I'm not going to appeal here to principle, but rather cynically to interest. I am not your father, your vicar, or your moral tutor at Oxford. But the practicalities argue in favor of your doing so. Particularly, in my experience, if you are Anglican. They'll feed you, often, along with the rest of the parish, and after about 2 meals served by your university, you will realize how important that is. You'll rub shoulders with deans and professors whom you'd not otherwise know outside of academic contexts, and you may become friends with them. This is valuable. Sometimes, admittedly, you may become enemies, which is not so useful. Parish politics are so envenomed because the stakes are so small. You'll be given, by involving yourself in your local parish, various opportunities to do voluntary work which will look very good on your CV. You'll also meet some of the locals who may turn out to be your adoptive aunts and uncles and grandparents while you're at university, friends for life, and future clients or patients. They may even invite you to fish, or hunt, or shoot with them. They may take you in and feed you on a regular basis. And having a church-going reputation usually helps when you need to shake the parents down for extra money and save on holiday presents at the bazaar of fate. Never forget that your elders at the parish may be a little hard of hearing and a tiny bit vague. I remember an uncomfortable 15 minutes after Matins one Sunday when I and one of my undergraduate professors, I was in law school by then, and his wife, a dear lady, got our signals crossed. She had told me that another of my former professors, who'd had a bit of a drinking problem, was now doing very well in recovery and had taken to spiritualism. What she meant to say was spirituality in the usual 12-step tradition. What I thought she meant, spiritualism having a defined meaning, was that he was now resorting to seances. Naturally, I said I was sorry to hear about that part of it. Equally naturally, this was not well received until we got the terminological confusion thrashed out in front of half the university and the whole parish. In the same way, involve yourself in the life of the town and the community in which your university is located. See proceeding for why. Do something active. Unless you are on an athletic scholarship, it need not be anything organized or strenuous. Angling, shooting, hunting are very good choices. So is squash. So especially is golf. Once you are in the real world, you'll be amazed at the number of deals, whether business mergers or employment decisions or cases settled for clients, which occur on the golf course or in the 19th hole. Dining clubs, fraternities, sororities, and similar institutions you could take or leave according to taste. If you have sense and taste, you'll probably leave them. It's not as if you're joining some conspiracy theorist version of the Freemasons, the Illuminati, or the Bilderbergers, who could rescue you from any trouble you get into for the rest of your life. Choose your friends wisely. You'll be stuck with them for a lot longer than you think, and all too often be judged by them, including being judged by them in the sense of being judged by the company you keep. Do not rely too much upon being clever, and for the love of God, don't make a big obtrusive show of being clever. It may impress your friends. They'll never cease to bring it up. They'll tell the story of the time you realized you had an essay due at midnight after a 3-bottle, 5-course French meal, wrote it in 15 minutes, and aced it. And they will tell this story every time they introduce you in a professional context or on a book tour for the remainder of your natural life. 3 and 4 decades later, your loyal friend still thinks this is a wonderful thing and a treasured memory, because he only hears the wows from the audience and not the equally frequent and equally audible comments of smart-ass prick. Besides, if you set being clever as a baseline, you're in severe difficulties if you ever drop below it. And when you have a truly brilliant inspiration, no one notices it or gives you credit for it. It does not matter what you are studying, reading, majoring in. What you need to learn at university is how to think, how to reason, and how to communicate clearly. The point of university is to learn how to spot false rhetoric, invalid reasoning, and horse shit. To learn how to reason validly and make your own points with proper rhetoric, how to communicate clearly and persuasively. This is true whether you intend to be a biologist, an astrophysicist, an entrepreneur, a financial analyst, a lawyer, a judge, a physician, a composer, or, God forbid, a politician. Join, if your university has such things, the university newspaper and or the university radio station. I am one of those who always had the voice and the face for radio. Particularly do this if you're not studying and do not wish to study journalism or communications. It is in your interest to do this. Firstly, you'll learn how the sausage is made and what goes into it, and shall therefore be forewarned against sausage for life. Secondly, you'll be forced to learn how to communicate clearly and concisely. It is regrettable that so many appellate judges, for example, never learned this. And lastly, as a matter of simple personal advantage, it comes with opportunities over and above merely burnishing your CV. If you have the talent for it, become the editorial cartoonist. If you can present, DJ, a music show on the radio, do so. You can score a lot of free tickets to various concerts. Become the newspaper's book reviewer and literary editor and get free books. Become its food critic and be able to eat cheaply at places other than the university's slop factory. Become its theater and cinema critic and go to free shows. The possibilities and advantages are endless. In fact, all of these things are good for you and good for your character, but I'm basing my appeal merely upon an appeal to your baser appetites and your self-interest. Fulfill your academic obligations, and a little over. In fact, fulfill them and a little over as far as you can, short of running the risk of acquiring tunnel vision and emerging certified but uncultured. These 3 or 4 years are your chance. Don't fuck it up and don't piss it away. At the age of 18 or 19 or any similar age, it matters a good deal less what you study, read, major in, than that you acquire the tools of lifelong learning, are grounded in logic, the ability to think, to reason, and to express the results clearly. You may think, arriving at university all dewy-eyed at the fresh new world before you, that you have a plan, that you have everything laid out, that you're going to be running on rails, that you know precisely what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you are going to attain your future. You know nothing of the sort. You may well not know at the age of 30 either. Do not trap yourself by believing that you are fitted only for whatever you thought you wanted to do with your life when you were 18 and had just shown up at university. Don't especially trap yourself by becoming fitted only for some profession you decided on at 18. And while I am a firm believer in filial piety, I caution you against saying to yourself or to others that your plans cannot be altered because your parents are helping pay for your education and these aren't their plans for you. Yes, it's their money, but it's your life. If you are still a suicidally depressed by your job banker after they've been dead of old age for 10 years, you fucked up somewhere, probably by listening to them. Your degree, your course of study, your major, what you read at university, does not define you unless you allow it to do so. Don't allow it to do. If you truly use university for its intended purpose, seizing the tools of knowledge, learning to reason, to think, and to communicate clearly, then it does not matter if you started as a biologist and end up as an osteoarchaeologist on Hadrian's Wall, or an infantry colonel, or the golf pro at Baltusrol. I, for example, am now an historian, and not, for which I thank God when I look at the current crop, an academic historian. I think I can say with fair confidence that grounded in logic, an understanding of politics as an academic discipline, and a thorough education in evidence has done me more good than their educations have done a number of recently graduated academic historians who seem to be bereft of logic, political dolts, utterly lacking in any sense of evidence and the credibility of witnesses, unable to understand in consequence the events they chronicle, to know which sources are credible, to understand the motives of statesmen and buck privates alike, to make sense of the past and convey it coherently, and to write readable English. Learning is infinitely adaptable and it is never wasted. Credentialing is the opposite. If you come out of university a clever bugger whom no one can bear, You'll be asking if the customer wants a side dish with their order in 3 dead languages. If, as is too often the case, you are turned loose from law school, preening yourself on having edited the law review and knowing everything about the rule in Shelley's case, but cannot locate a deed record or the clerk's office, God help your clients and the overworked disciplinary committee. If you can brandish a celebrated honors degree but are so nasty a piece of work no one would hire you as a floor sweeper, well, the political career beckons, I suppose, or you might become a novelist. Otherwise, it's unemployment, the dole for you. Here is the difference between education, which few university students these days receive unless they create it for themselves, and credentialing, which seems to be being handed out like after-dinner mints. We live in a world now which has lost several English words with fine shades and distinctions of meaning for everything from happy to miserly, because people put their feelings of offense first and their non-existent knowledge of etymology dead last. The Normans and the Vikings must be terribly confused. We live in a world in which credentialed technical people, many of these in charge of multi-billion-dollar corporations, talk glibly of Trojan horses and could not tell you anything about the Trojan War, let alone have read a single line even in translation of the Iliad. We live in a world in which a considerable number of people believe Winston Churchill, Gandhi, and Florence Nightingale to have been fictional characters, Eleanor Rigby to have been a real person, Abraham Lincoln to have been a Democrat, and Italy to have been one of the allies in the Second World War. We live, as I have noted, in a world in which powerful persons actually think Augustus was a good guy, and that Cicero is a town in Illinois. We live amongst, and partly at the mercy of, credentialed morons, many of them unelected, others elected by morons who aren't even credentialed. Are you trained and armed to fight against this? In your own interest, you ought to be. And university is, or ought to be, your Fort Benning. Do you intend to conduct your life and your affairs and business in English? I hate to disappoint you, but the modern, very modern, English syllabus and popular works in English ain't going to hack it. That dog won't hunt. The English roots of our modern English tongue are to be found in certain currently unpopular works and authors who continue to exert an ineradicable influence upon our language, our minds and thoughts, and us. Beowulf, Bede, Chaucer, the authorized version, the King James version to some of you, the BCP, the Book of Common Prayer, Shakespeare, and Milton. Ignorance, and especially a hostile ignorance of these, renders it practically impossible for you to read and understand anyone who lived and wrote before about 1960, and some of us afterwards. This elder canon not only affected how they thought, spoke, and wrote, but how they acted and upon what motives. You don't have to like it, but it made the world you live in and must navigate for the rest of your lives. It does not matter if you get an honors degree so impressive as to cast all previous degrees awarded by your university into shadow. If you emerge with that degree and a cultural horizon and intellectual hinterland so limited, so desert dry, that if someone asks you for the name of the most famous child prodigy in musical history, you can't think of Mozart or even of Steve Winwood, you're merely a clever ape in trousers who will die alone and drunk and burnt out by the age of 40 and not be missed or mourned. Therefore, fulfill your degree obligations in a little over, but stop short of requiring tunnel vision and emergence certified but uncultured. This would be different were a university of trade school, but it is not. It is your one chance to acquire both the tools of learning, which must last you throughout your lifetime, and that intellectual cultivation which shall teach you towards which objects and goals you ought to use them. So don't spend your summers swatting away at your course, or partying, or trying to figure out how to make enough money to see you through the next academic year. I do not say that the first and last of these things are not, within measure, important. But take 3 weeks to do the Wainwright Coast to Coast. I'm looking at you here, Joel. Spend a fortnight on a trout stream. Work on your short game and your putting, garden. Volunteer for something non-partisan and apolitical. Join a book club. Write a book. It'll be terrible, unpublishable, and unmarketable, but it's good practice. Ride. Get into steam trains and cider making. Train a gun dog. Work with sheep. Go to as many baseball games and cricket matches as you can. Go to the opera festival. You might actually like it, and at least there'll be strawberries and sandwiches. And Shakespeare in the Park and the 4th of July Classical Pops concert. Learn to cook. My people saw to it that I did, good help being not only expensive but hard to find nowadays, and it being evident early on that no woman in her right mind should ever think of marrying me. Study Old Norse with Dr. Jackson Crawford just for the hell of it. Learn blacksmithing with Alex Steele or Will Stelta, or painting with Michael James Smith. Take up beekeeping. Train to become a kennel club judge for dachshunds. Learn music theory so you know why you like what you like. Do your family's genealogy. Write an epic poem entirely in the subjunctive. Throw pottery, anything. But get 8 of this damned junior professional cage. A university graduate ought to have, to some degree at least, a universal education, goddammit. Just, for God's sake, do something. Cultivate your mind, your skills, and your body in ways which are directed neither towards short-term gratification nor the obtaining of a credential which in 10 years shall have been forgotten or shall be of no use to you in whatever career which by then has opened up to you and which you were not expecting. A university is not a trade school. Its purpose is not to churn out grotty little middle managers and minor functionaries with dreams of attaining power and money. We as a species do not deserve dogs or horses or trout streams or Bach or Carolina beach music or big bands, Vermeer and Stubbs and Deakins and Remington and Russell, Virgil and Steele and Betjeman. We don't deserve sunrises or the love of God or salvation. The purpose of university is to fit you to begin to become the sort of person who does. These are your university years before you. Stay reasonably fit in body, but for the love of God, come out well-rounded as an individual. Here endeth the lesson.